Hey guys, welcome to Just About Movies podcast. I'm Elliot, that's Jack, that's Alex. We're going to be doing a film review today of the film I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
I think of ending things.
I am so glad Jake has found someone.
Soon this will all be a distant memory. Who is this?
It's me.
No, it was me.
How are you feeling about this one, guys?
Yeah.
Speechless. Completely speechless. Just nothing to say. I think we're going to start with a bit of a couple of minutes, and we'll do a bit of a spoiler-free review. Jack, do you want to take us through what you thought of the film, mate?
Just as do you want me to take through it as a storyline or what I actually thought of the film?
Just review it, mate. Just what
review.
you thought of it.
I'm not a big fan of this one, I'll be completely honest. I thought the opening and the start of the film was pretty strong. Horror, thriller, feeling, pretty good intro. Grabbed me a bit, sucked me in. I like the characters. I think the acting was really good throughout. I thought all the actors were brilliant. Cinematography was really good too, I think, as well. But general review is I think it tries to be too complicated, really, really heavy with the dialogue. I think overbearing sometimes because if you're not sitting there with your ear to the screen trying to pick up every little bit of info, I think you probably miss something which is key. So yes, it's an interesting watch. I think it's worth watching because it's got a lot of big subjects in there, and overall it's I would give it was an okay one for me, but I wouldn't go and watch it again though.
Fair enough. What about yourself, Alex?
Okay, so it's directed by Charlie Kaufman. His most famous film involvement is Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. So he's quite like he's quite like an arty director, and that like totally shows in this film because it's a very arty piece. It's shot 4:3, so everything's really tight within the frame, which is a positive for the film, obviously, because he wants you to kind of see everything in the frame closely because everything has a meaning in every scene. So the whole film is a big allegory, which is like a story with a hidden meaning, if you didn't know what that means. But yeah, I felt the opening hour was awesome, but then it just lost it for me after that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so I think the film critics will love it, but regular kind of audiences won't enjoy it.
I agree.
Me.
I agree. I think it is the film that potentially the general film watching public would struggle with. But I loved it. I also agree with you, Alex, in the sense that first hour I thought was amazing. I thought it was really good, and then I think the next sort of 40 minutes I struggled with a little bit, but then towards the end again it picked up for me, and I really enjoyed the ending again. I think it's one of those films where a lot happens, and it's sort of hard to follow, but when you go a bit deeper into it, everything kind of has a reason and a meaning. And I think for me, I really enjoy films like that. I like films that take you on a journey and then you kind of have to rewatch it or look up, what it could have meant, and everyone's got different opinions on it. And I do really like stuff like that. Like Jack said, really well acted, shot really well. That 4:3, I think it just there's something uneasy about it, but I also like the fact that everything's happening right there, and it's you're not left to wonder about anything else happening on the screen. You're watching what is happening within that small frame, and I do really like that. So I think from us, I would say in general, it's probably a middle of the road sort of thing then. So you'd, like you say, not really going to be everyone's cup of tea, but if you're into film and you're into sort of confusing storylines and sort of subcontext and stuff like that, and hidden and meaning, then this is probably a great film for you. Then I would imagine.
Yeah.
I think so. That's our spoiler-free review of it. So if that's all you needed to hear.
Hey, now this all, before they all make me look like I'm completely non-film art house guy, right? I do like a good art house film, but you know, I'm not like, oh, Jack doesn't get the subliminal messages. I got all the messages. Okay?
Oh, hold on. You called yourself the general audience, mate. Not you put your hand up.
I wish I was. What does that mean? But overall, now I figured it out in 45 minutes, which I think sort of killed the film for me as well. My girlfriend had read the book, which she sort of knew what was going to happen before it's happening, and I was sort of spitballing ideas out throughout it, and I got onto the right one after 45 minutes with one scene which gave it away for me, and then as soon as I figured it out, it dragged on. It felt like it was too long then. Yeah,
I think that's where I'm opposite to you, because I hadn't figured it out. I was just eager to get to that point. And my mum phoned me, actually. There was 8 minutes left of the film, and my mum phoned me, and I must have been really off with her, because I was just like, oh, I need to keep it in here. I need to know when I go back to this film that I get the ending and that I can follow it. So I must have sounded really off to her. But then so I really enjoyed it. I wanted to get to the conclusion. I wanted to figure it out. We'll go a bit more spoilery now. So move on if you didn't want to spoil us to the film. Go live your life. If you want a bit more in depth, let's get a little bit more in depth. Right, where do we start? Should we try and run this through from the beginning and try and get to the end and try and figure it out? So the opening. So it opens. She's always talking. She narrates the whole way through. So is it safe to say that you're led to believe this is all in her head the whole way through? Would you say?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think it sets itself up to feel as if it's sort of biographical, doesn't it? Sets it up as if it's sort of like a memoir of her relationship with this guy to start off with, and it feels almost like a sort of a romance, doesn't it? It feels like it's going to be like a off the ball sort of rom thing going on, then it gets really, I think the cinematography of that the snow really draws you in close fast. I think that was what was brilliant about it, and you got to give it to Lucas South, the way he sort of shot that and brings you in with the storm, and it's vertically framed and it's coming down fast, and it feels like the tempo picks up quick there, and you feel sort of angsty and a bit anxious about the conversation. It seems to become a bit like, you're a bit like, whoa, this seems a bit like, it's almost a jarring conversation, the way they're back and forward.
It's so jarring. I mean, what's really interesting, you say about cinematography, so I actually read a review and they said that the cinematography is terrible, and it's almost like it's made by film students, and I completely and utterly disagree. I think it was shot so
that's a bit harsh.
I thought it was, I mean, I think it's so wrong. I think that's just it's a wrong assessment of it. I think it is shot really well. It's shot a little bit quirky, but I think that's part of it. But I think that first driving scene, which is a good 28 minutes, I think it is, it's easy to think that all they're doing is having a conversation, but there's so much more. So much is given away in that moment, So they talk about poetry, physics, and I believe they talk about, is it age? They talk about age or something like that in that time. And
age is just a number. They go through sort of a rundown of those little phrases and sayings which are sort of applicable to everyday life, don't they? But that seems to them, it's another connotation what comes later.
Yeah, and I think so. It's important so now we can say spoilers. It's important to remember that the idea is she does not exist, and she is essentially, so he is basically creating scenarios in his head of what his life could have been like with a girl that he met but didn't get the number of. So it's sort of like, which is why she, in the car, and I'm talking within the space of like 10 minutes here, in the car, she says, I don't like poems. And then she reads off a massive poem that she supposedly wrote. So her personality changed just like that. And that's because it's him he can't put his finger on a personality of what he would have the girl be like. So she changes. And that's such an interesting thing throughout the film. If you watch how many times she is somebody different.
Yeah, she even gains an accent at one point, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And becomes a completely different person. She becomes someone from, is it not Gone with the Wind, The King and I? Doesn't she become the lead actress from The King and I?
Woman Under the Influence.
That's it. She becomes someone who's completely different to this character you're watching. That's later down the line. But I agree. It almost feels like, it's like Split. There's like 21 different, there's like the characters are just flying out everywhere.
But it's so subtle, isn't it?
Fair play.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Guys, you've picked up on things that I didn't pick up on. I was struggling to work out what was going on, because obviously you've got the contrast. You keep seeing, obviously now we know that it's the boyfriend who's grown older. It keeps flicking to him when he's older, being a janitor in a school. And then you start to think, okay, so he's the boyfriend when he's older. That is the only thing that I could make from that.
Really?
Really?
I picked up on the changes that the girl was going through. So you don't even remember her name, like in the first hour. I think he calls her 2 or 3 different names.
He calls her Lucy.
Lucy. And you know why?
He calls her Lucy, and then he calls her
Lucy,
something like...
then he calls her Lucille, and then he calls her
Amy. Yeah.
And there's Yvonne as well.
Yeah, and Yvonne. And the reason that is because, once again, he didn't know the person's name who he's creating this fake life with. So she is taking on any persona that he then is putting her in. And I think, I found it so interesting. And I read up on it afterwards. The woman that, in the car journey, she suddenly starts smoking and has an accent.
Yeah.
And she's giving a review of a film.
Yeah.
And it actually turns out she's actually, the persona that she's doing is the person who actually reviewed that film in real life.
Oh, that's cool.
And she's reading the review word for word of what this actual woman did, and she's acting like that reviewer. And and that's because in his subconscious, he has read the book that reviewer wrote, so he knows that. So he's put that persona on his imagination of her. It's quite deep to get into, to be honest.
That's insane. Yeah, you need to do your research on this film.
Yeah. I don't even think we've got beyond the first scene. We're still talking about the car sequence right now, which is incredible, because that's 23 minutes of this 2 hour and what was it, 8 minutes film. And it was saying, and the opening scene is like, if you don't know who Wordsworth was, I think was the poet. He writes the poem called Lucy, which is then the construction which this man generates in his brain as this woman who is perfectly elegant and young, but then dies young as well.
Yeah.
So and I think that's sort of, again, it's all projection and subconscious projection throughout it. So you've got to be so. But also, I think this is where it gets tricky, because when you get to the parents' house, so I'll just move us along a little bit to the parents' house.
Before we get to the parents' house, can I ask? Did you guys hear? It was so subtle, but when they were driving in the first scene, and she looks, and there's that sign, isn't there? It's like a lit up sign. I thought it was a sign for a circus at first, but it's for the ice cream place.
The ice cream, yeah.
Did you hear the voice at that point? It's so quiet.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
She looks at the thing midway of them both talking, and a voice says, hold on, I've written it down. A voice says, "Come join me." And I was like, I said to Harley, I was like, hold on, whoa. I was like, someone's just said, "Come join me," and it wasn't in the voice of both of the main characters in the car. And that, for me, I'll come back to it later on. We get it, but I just wanted to ask whether you heard it, because it's so subtle. Honestly, you just hear. She looks up at the sign, and I think she's in her head at this point and saying something, and it just goes, "Come join me," like that, and that's it, and it carries on with the conversation. And I just wanted to see if you guys heard it, because this is what I mean with the film is this, but there's so much going on beneath the surface that's just giving things away that you just need to look into afterwards. But yeah, let's move on to the house. Go into the house, Jack.
Yeah, sort of trailing off from where I was before, it then becomes, I think this is where the complexity kicks in, and it sort of becomes a little bit, it tries to interweave a little too much, because at this point it becomes memories accompanied with subconscious projection, which then elaborate to his sort of progressive movement in his own conscious. So it's sort of, you're there and you're sort of like, okay, the age concept comes back into play, and it just seems to become sporadically changing, and you can't quite grip why that's happening at that time. But then it's to do with, I'm not going to spoil the end yet because we'll get to that, but it's to do with, it is one of those films with sort of pinnacles on the end sequence, and it's sort of, that's where everything unfolds, which does, is, but I somehow guessed it, which is weird, but I thought Llewyn Davis was magnificent as the father. I thought he was great.
David Thewlis.
Yeah, sorry, I thought it was Llewyn Davis, isn't it?
No, David
Thewlis.
Oh,
that's his name. Yeah. I always forget his name.
David
Remus Lupin
David
from
Lewis,
Harry Potter.
David Lewis, yeah. I'll do it with a Welsh accent. I'll do it better than you guys. David Lewis was his name there, and yeah, he's and we watched a film of his actually naked in university, which was pretty rough, the '93 one. But I think I've always been a fan of his work. I think he's great as the dad. I think them just focusing on the two performances of him and Tony Collette, like they're just so like odd, creepy, aren't they? They're horror characters. They are horror characters in that. And then
what did you make of the house scene, Alex? What was your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so this is like, I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought, like Jack said, I thought it was going to turn into like a horror film.
Yeah, it got scary, didn't it?
Yeah, so
there's that barn sequence as well, where the door opens in the background. You know that, and I was like, that's how I picture Elliot describing Bly Manor. That's literally what I picture happening all the time.
You just expect like someone to be there looking at the camera or something.
Yeah, but the weird thing is. Yeah, I actually forgot about that bit until you said that. See, this is what I mean. There's so much happening that I think, and it all has a meaning. And the house is just bizarre. Sorry, Alex, you were saying what? Go on.
Yeah. So as soon as they got into the house, it takes like 10, 15 minutes for the parents to actually come downstairs to introduce themselves to the girlfriend, and I thought that was so strange. I started contemplating like, do they actually exist?
Yeah.
Is her boyfriend going to kill her? Then they move on to like the basement, and he's stopping her from going into the basement. Like,
very defensive.
Well, why is he stopping her from going into the basement? Is he hiding something? But there's scratches on the doors, and she asks him what the scratches are, and he says, "Oh, they're from my dog."
Oh,
yes.
And then the dog shows up.
He says it in a way.
It reassures you again. It reassures you again.
Exactly that. He says it in a way that you believe that he's like lying, and then the dog actually shows up, and he's called the right name. I forgot the dog's name, but
did you notice? Did you notice in the bedroom the dog's ashes in an urn?
Oh no! Good little spot, mate.
Spotted it straight away when she goes up to the bedroom and looks at the shelf. There's an urn there, and it's got a little picture of it, of the dog on it. And I was like, we've just seen the dog 3 times, and there's an urn right there. So it's
good spot.
It's little things like that, little just giving it away. And it makes you just sort of unhinged, doesn't it? You're watching it going, like what is? And the dog's shaking for ages. Why do you never? Do you realise you never see the dog's face? The dog walks up to him.
And this is where I think the negative for me comes in. I felt like sometimes there was just too much to absorb in such that it was too much. There was so many little Easter egg attachments in there. If you weren't picking up on it, it was like that's where it sort of drew me. And this is at the point where we're in the house where I figured it out. But I still was sort of like, I think it's a bit overkill at times still with all those things. It doesn't need to be all those things. It could have been a lot simpler with the way they sort of told the house sequence. I think maybe it was trying to be a horror thriller, but then it's not. Is it? Is it a horror thriller film? Would you say it's not?
At all, I would say it's more of a drama. Is it not?
Yeah.
According to some pages, they're calling it a psychological horror.
But potentially it is, I suppose. But I think the thing with the house scene is, you could argue it went on too long, but I think the problem with films like this is that you can spend too long diving into what you think it can be, and that then can spoil the film for you. Because this is just me personally, but I'm constantly trying to figure it out and piece it together so I can go have that moment, like I imagine you had, Jack, that sort of eureka moment of, oh, that's it. But this film just never got there. So you spend the entire 2 hours plus just going, oh, what is going on? And I think that can spoil it for people. And I think that is a negative. And I think that's why people don't like these sorts of films. I, for one, though, I like little hidden things. I like it being bombarded with stuff. And then that will make me want to watch it again, because I'll go, oh, look, that happened there. Oh, look, actually, she said this at that point. And that, so for me, I quite like that. And I think the house scene was a prime example of everything you see, there's a reason for it. Every look, every like, even the way the mum and dad watched her. Did you notice that as she would walk behind, the mum and dad would watch her like that?
Yeah.
And like follow her around, which is really odd. Like, but it all has some sort of hidden meaning and reason for it, and I really like that. Let's one of my notes here is just Toni Collette is amazing, because
Mate, same. My note has the same thing written on it. She has to be nominated for an Oscar this year.
Please, someone give her an Oscar. That
she's so
woman
committed to her role.
Awesome.
She was so, as Elliot said earlier, unhinged in that.
Yeah.
Like, so unhinged. And you were like, she was likable, but terrifying at the same time. She seems like a nice mum. But wait a second, she's a that crazy mum at the same time. You're like, what's going on?
But did you notice that they were all quite hot, like passive aggressive to each other?
Yeah.
So the son was very aggressive towards the mum. That was obvious. But there was one point where the lady, or Lucy or Lucille or whatever you want to call her, she says something to her that is just, it's not very nice. And the way that Toni Collette sort of responded to it, and she went, oh my God, that's lovely. She's such a lovely girl. And I was like, she just insulted you. And I couldn't, and the conversation at the dinner table, first off, is so weirdly unsettling and bizarre. But actually, just before that, the age change. When did you first notice the age change?
Do you know what? I probably missed this significantly more than me and Elliot sort of had a little general chat before, and he was really sort of on the ball with this, because he says he loves the sort of purposeful placement of every object and every little tiny frame sequence of movement. Do you know what? It took me a minute. It was when the father came in to the upstairs room. That's how long it took me.
Yeah.
And that's and that's when I went, now something's developing even more. I was like, now.
Wait, so is that not the first scene we see the age change? I thought that was the first.
I love this, mate. When they walk down the stairs and greet them, they are old, and literally he says, "Let's not wait. The food will be as cold as a nun's organ," or something like that. And as the camera turns and changes to face the young girl, he takes a step off the stairs, and his hair isn't grey, it's brown. And then the rest of the dinner scene, he's not old. And I stopped.
Ooh.
I stopped it and went, it happens like that. It's literally reverse cut angle, and he's not old anymore. And literally the dinner table, I had to stop it, and I said, Harley, I'm sorry, I'm rewinding it. Did you see that? Because she was sort of on her phone because she wasn't really interested. I made her watch it. I rewinded it. I went, did you see that? And she was like, no. What happened? I was like, he just de-aged in one cut. And it happens again. Like, it happens, and then obviously you see him as an old man upstairs again, but he's been young the whole time downstairs. But he came down the stairs old at the beginning. So that straight away, I was hooked. I was like, what is going on? Because did you not even think it was weird when he said, let's have dinner, otherwise it'll be cold? He took a step off the stairs, and then she turned around and they're already sat around the table.
Yeah. I know. You like,
It was instant.
and I think one thing you've got to give this film credit for was the camera work. I thought was brilliant. I
think so.
I thought the one and as Alex said earlier, that 4:3 was so daring in the modern world of cinema to put a 4:3 film out there, which is a psychological thriller and shot.
Lighthouse.
Yeah. But yeah, it's black and white, isn't it? But I thought this was really daring, and there was some lovely camera motions in there, especially that track away to the what was it? The CD player, not CD player, vinyl
record player.
Yeah, and it dragged away, and then the tension built with that drag away, and you were like, "What's going on over here now?" And I thought that was all great and all horror, but then because the film's genre is sort of misplaced, that's where it jarred me again a little bit, and I think that's where I found a lot of negatives in it. I found it could be overly jarring sometimes, and it was overly cut, maybe a second too fast. Things jumped a little bit too quickly. If you give it a little bit longer for it to linger on that shot, we all know the effects that can have in horror. Just lingering for an extra 1 or 2 seconds can make you just be like, whoa. But then maybe that was the purpose. Maybe that's the whole point of the film and the director, to show how sporadic the camera movement was, because what of the projections of what was happening in this, in this one character. So I don't know. Anyway,
let's move forward a little bit to the
nice one, Jack.
To the bedroom scene. So obviously she can't find him, goes into his childhood bedroom, and at this point the dad is like forgetting everything. And in this scene, this reveals so much, because if you are switched on and you pick it up enough, in this one scene you can see the poem, the book that she read out in the car, that's in. You can see the physics book in which she's supposedly studying, even though she's sort of a poet and a physicist and does painting and all that. There's loads of stuff that dive into his psyche here, and so I thought this was a really interesting scene. But did you clock on that the poem that she started reading by the bed was the same poem she read in the car?
Yeah, I did get that bit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's it's little things like that just take you back out again and make you uneasy, aren't they? And then he starts.
Did you notice
about,
Was this before or after? Was this before or after the basement scene? I can't
before.
remember. Is it before the basement scene?
Yeah.
So can you give me an accurate timeline of this film?
I'll tell you what's happened so far. We've had the car journey, introduced to the parents, dinner table, and then as she turns around from having like a talk at the dinner table, they're all gone. And she calls upstairs. Jake says he's upstairs, so she goes upstairs, goes into the bedroom, and that's where we're up to. So we haven't gone too deep into the house too much yet. This bit, she has a really awkward conversation with the dad, where the dad talks about fucking on the bed.
Yeah, I find that funny though. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, it was funny, but it was quite jarring compared to everything else, because like nothing had really. I mean, for me, this was just his, like his conscious sort of overactive male mind, just putting in sex wherever he could, sort of thing. Oh, imagine if we're snowed in, have to stay at my parents' house with the girl, I'd probably end up banging her on the bed, even though it's too small for us, sort of thing. That's what I sort of got from it. But so after that, they go. Toni Collette's aged again, so she's in a wheelchair being fed.
Yes.
What do we think?
Yes. Yeah. I thought she went to the basement after dinner, or was it after the feeding?
She goes upstairs, sees Toni Collette in a wheelchair, and then goes downstairs. And when she gets downstairs, Toni Collette's really young again.
Yeah. And
tells her her son's insecurities, which is kind of like him sort of through himself. He's projecting that for his mum. Like his mum always knew he was a bit insecure and stuff. And then she tells her to go down to the basement, and then she does. What do you think of the basement scene, Alex?
Sorry, before that, when you said she came downstairs and seen Toni Collette, did you notice the I think Hereditary fans will
Yeah.
love this kind of like Easter egg.
What was
Obviously,
that all about?
Toni Collette's in this film, but when she comes down this stairs, she says like a random line saying, "If my head weren't screwed on, it would fall off," or something like that.
Mate, it's
And
weirder than that. Do you know what she actually says?
Go
She
on.
says, if my head wasn't attached to my head,
That's it. Yeah.
then it would fall off. Which, that's a weird saying because it's wrong.
And horror fans and Hereditary fans will kind of love that little kind of thing. I think they obviously knew what they were talking
Do you
about.
think it is? Do you think it's a nod to Hereditary?
Yeah, of course they did. Like, she would have definitely have mentioned that when
my mind started racing
scene.
then. My mind started racing. I was like, oh, in the basement, there's severed heads. And there's like, because they reference a lot of things when they talk about how, like, you know, their heads aren't attached properly, or because the bloke even says something, Jake says something at one point about his head, and I was like, oh my God, are they like, do they take the heads off of people soon? My mind started racing, but then a part of me was like, was that just a Hereditary thing?
It's like the nowadays horror heads just keep getting decapitated at the minute.
I just thought it was a weird saying because obviously the saying is that if my head wasn't attached to my body, I swear I'd lose it or something like that. And she says if my head wasn't attached to my head, which is weird.
Which is funny, isn't it? It's another, yeah. This is where these boys, you can tell these boys absolutely love it when it gets to little cameo moments and little horror moments. They get little erections, and they're like, "Oh yeah."
You're talking to the Toni Collette fan club right now.
Also, did you notice in the bedroom? Sorry, going back to the bedroom quickly. There's a Beautiful Mind DVD/book. Could be a DVD, could be a book.
Well, here's the other thing. Would you skip into the very end? Did anyone not know?
Let's wait till we get to that. But I think,
so that's another one.
That is an interesting point. I'm glad you guys picked that up. That's quite cool. Because Beautiful Mind is one of my favourite films. So when we get to the end, that's quite an interesting bit.
A lot of homage in this film, wasn't there? A lot of homage, I think, in this film throughout. Even mentions The Lion King, I think, at one point, which is just completely out of the that's what I mean.
He was talking about musicals, isn't he?
So the conversation is so layered with dialogue, you will miss things, and you know. But and it sounds like I don't like the whole sort of psychological subconscious like genre as a whole, but I love a lot of, you know, I'm a big, and I like Inception, I like The Spotless Mind as well, the Jim Carrey one. I do like those sort of deep subconscious thrillers. They are cool. They are like very cool. And this was definitely one of those, but I felt like it was, those ones always do move a little bit slightly more with imagery rather than dialogue, and this was a little bit more dialogue, apart from obviously apart from all the little sort of idiosyncratic moments where they drop placements in it, which you guys love. So I think
let's summarize. So the house scene essentially is him playing scenarios in his head and creating how he thinks she would react to these scenarios and how she would play out if he had ever brought her home to meet his parents. Once again, it's another case of, I mean, this film is a case of what ifs, isn't it? The whole thing is, you know, regret of not doing something, because I think that's quite a relatable thing, because I feel like we all think, oh, imagine if it's actually, I actually wrote down, it's the butterfly effect, sliding doors, but of the mind. So the whole thing is, it's not showing you, oh my God, it could have been this way. This is literally him thinking, could this have been this way? And I think that house scene is, he's picking moments of his life, you know, his mum getting old and needing feeding, his dad losing his memory, and he's putting her in these situations and creating almost a life that he never had. So we get to a point after that where they get back in the car and they drive again, and we have a very, very long car sequence of them talking.
Yeah, one thing we did miss was the barn sequence where he mentions the pig, which is a big part to play. He goes into the barn and he sees a pig with maggots, where he tells a story about how maggots ate the inside of these pigs, and there's a stain on the floor. And that again is an analogy for what's happening in his own subconscious, without any, another big spoil.
Do you think? I got a different take of the pig thing.
Do you not? Ah, okay.
My take on the pig thing was that had happened in his life, and he was a little bit traumatized by it.
Now see, I read that now, but I don't remember the end. But I could give you.
Let's do the car scene, because we can come back to the whole film and reference it once we get.
Yeah,
to
we'll do it at the end. Yeah.
So the second car scene. This is now where I feel like we see Lucy manifest characters a bit more. It's not as subtle. When she became a poet twice and then a physicist, that's almost was a natural change. But this one, she starts smoking out of nowhere. She has an accent, and it's just quite jarring. What do you make of that, Alex?
This is where kind of like this is like coming to the third act of the movie now.
Yeah,
and it kind of lost me in a way.
Me
because
too.
it was so similar to the first act. I never thought they would leave the house for a start, because he tried to keep her there. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
He was trying to keep her in the house. He didn't want to leave. So the second car sequence, it's full of monologues. It's full of poems. They reference essays that probably none of us have read. Maybe they're a staple kind of thing that you must read in the schools in America, but like it seems like a popular essay that someone has read over there.
Yeah.
The director's obviously a very intelligent director. But then you come up to the ice cream parlor and they purchase an ice cream.
You have three girls in this scene.
Yeah.
You have two attractive blonde workers who don't seem very nice.
No.
And then one girl who seems very nice. This is where I feel like, although the house stuff was dark, this is where I felt like it got dark and I was almost a bit on edge. And because I felt
there's a violent undertone to this bit.
Yeah, I thought there was I think it's just because the nice girl warned her, and that straight away is alarm bells, isn't it? She said you don't have to go forward in time.
Yeah, so we get to the ice cream parlor and you start to realise that there's something not quite right, because you believe that the whole film up until this point has been real for the characters. But then with this scene, you just start to realise, like, is this film actually, is this like a dream sequence now? Like, is this actually happening? So his girlfriend, Lucy, gets out of the car, orders two ice creams from the parlour, and there's two blonde girls, and the main character, the boyfriend, he kind of avoids them.
Yeah.
And you start to wonder why he's avoiding these two girls. Has he had a relationship with them, or does he fancy him and he doesn't want to give off that vibe to his girlfriend? And
the odd thing is loads of weird stuff's happened, but he hasn't recoiled from anything, but he recoils from this.
Yeah,
he does.
Does he have a brief conversation in the car about
pretty girls,
pretty girls and people's behaviour,
and
how he's experienced those?
I actually stopped writing notes from this point onward, because I actually wanted to just fully focus on the film, because I felt like this was the crux of this is where it was going. Because he was talking about pretty girls and them they can be mean. I thought, is there some sort of revenge thing going on now? Like he's got himself a pretty girl and he's doing something to torment her or something. But it's an odd scene, like the rest of the film. And it seems to go nowhere, but it just ends with that warning that you don't have to go forward in time, I believe it is.
Yeah.
And time's a key thing throughout all of this, isn't it? I mean, the aging and de-aging that we see, they constantly talk about age and how there's a stigma around aging. She often talks about that. But do you find that every time she starts almost thinking for herself and going beyond what he wants, it's okay, we're here now, and it ends the conversation?
Yeah.
So in the house, when she starts picking up a little bit more, the parents coming downstairs now, and then it's like, dismiss that. When they're driving along the road, she's getting really annoyed about the song Baby It's Cold Outside, and saying how it's quite a rapey song, and she's getting more and more agitated because he can't win the conversation. So, oh look, we've arrived, and then the conversation's over, and it's always conveniently ending.
That's clever.
And I think that's what happens.
She mentions marriage, and he refuses marriage as well, doesn't he?
Yeah. And I think this is what happens in the next bit. They're having an argument. She doesn't want to be going the way she's going. And then they arrive at the school. And this is where it's all been leading to.
Boosh.
And it's just a 20-minute scene of like random stuff happening, but has a meaning, but it's really hard to understand.
Art house.
Yeah. Had you, at this point, had you clocked on that the janitor was him?
Yeah, I clocked that on in the first 45 minutes because, as I said, I saw in the basement that his janitorial clothes being washed.
Overalls.
Yeah, overalls. Yeah.
So, but I think that's quite an easy thing to establish. I think very early on you can get that. But this is where the point is, did you still believe at this point that she was real?
Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of do, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of believe that she. Well, obviously, yeah, but I sort of figured it, but I could understand looking into it how you'd still believe she's real because they've been in all these moments where it's been sort of practical things have happened, physical things have happened. They ice cream together, they're taking journeys together. Those are all physical situations.
But we're all in her head as well.
But all, yeah.
So,
and this is where I think it gets really, really like, you're sort of like, whoa, what is happening here? Because it's not just one, it's like Inception. It's not just one level of projection. There's another level of projection.
Yeah.
And it is, you know, I can see where you guys like found it fun and found it gripping because there's a lot of content and there's a lot of content to it. But I think at this point, I just went, I lost my way. I was like,
let's run through it.
My guy just started balleting. I was like, that's it.
But I thought that was a great scene. So let's run through it. He goes in and puts his cup in the bin. She follows him. Now, I thought this was quite menacing because I thought it seemed like he was luring her into something. So that for me was quite a menacing thing. And then when she gets in the school, this is where she now meets the janitor. And they have a really sort of endearing conversation, and I think it's really nice and it's quite sweet, and you realise actually this janitor isn't some evil person or some sort of creep that you sort of led to believe, and then the little subtle thing of him offering her slippers, and those slippers are the same ones that he offered in the thing. So you start to, you know, those pieces fall in place. But like you said, there's an interpreted dance sequence that happens just after this. But it's not by the two main characters, it's by two people playing the two main characters.
Which are younger versions of their characters they are themselves. Again, it was like younger versions. And then, but have you noticed the one thing which I thought was really good with that exchange between the janitor and her, Lucy, or whatever we're calling her, was that he never looks her in the eye. He never looks at her directly. He's always looking past her. And that's what I think is another indicator that he actually can't physically take the confrontation of what's happening between him and her and him and and that's
internal struggle. What did you make of the dance sequence, Alex? What did you get from that?
I think you could kind of see it coming because he previously, in an earlier sequence, he walked past a pair of dancers.
Yeah.
And he was also in a theatre where they was kind of acting a similar kind of performance out.
Oklahoma. They were doing the musical Oklahoma, yeah.
That's it. And he mentioned that musical in the car on the first journey.
Mm-hmm.
So it obviously it means something big to him. He was quite passionate about that film in particular.
Musicals in general, wasn't he? Massive on him.
So I think, is that what he wanted to do with his perfect girlfriend?
But did you not think, what I got from it was that dance was an interpretation of what his life could have been.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
all singing, dancing, and loving, and then they got married because I think that veil dropped on her head, didn't it? And a priest stepped in and did the marriage.
Yeah.
But then the janitor character breaks up the dance and stabs the hymn dancer. So I feel like it seems like a very obvious sort of way of saying this is
He
what
doesn't
I
like
could have been.
himself.
But the janitor part of him took over, and he never got to become this, fantasized version of himself.
Yeah.
But
he hates what he's become, and he had to kill his own self to get over that. Basically,
he almost
killed
finishes
that
his
romantic side of
admiration.
him.
Yeah.
Killed that part of him where he wanted to fall in love and dance and get married is gone and dead, and he killed that, and now he's this shell janitor, and that's his view of himself, really, is that he's killed that sort of part of him. But this is then when it gets, we just follow the janitor now, don't we? And I think he goes in his car, takes all his clothes off, and starts sort of having like a fit, and then
I think it's a panic attack.
It's something like that.
I think this is the point he actually dies, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I picked up that I think he died, because then the last, sorry to move on a little bit, but the last shot of the film is the car that he was in is covered in snow, so he never actually made it out of the car.
So if he dies there, and what he's seeing, his last, you could argue that the entire film is like his life flashing before his eyes, because it's all these big moments of his life that he's sort of flashing through. So you could argue it's that, but he sees the weird advertisement, doesn't he, for the ice cream place play in the windscreen. Do you remember?
Yeah, I think that's his childhood, isn't it? That's his childhood memories. And then the pig pops up again, and with the maggots, and it sort of takes him inside, back into the thing, completely naked.
To look at his final...
To watch his final ballot, his glory moment. I think that's the moment where he envisions how his life would have been if everything had fallen into place.
Have you
Do
you know who voices the pig?
No, who's it?
Oliver Platt.
Is it?
So Oliver,
it was, and
but he's really calm. The pig is. Do you not find the pig isn't scary in any way? You actually go, oh, but it's a pig that's got but maggots falling off.
Blood, yeah. But do you know what I think it is? I obviously discussed this with my partner, who's read the book, and she loves the book, the Ian Reid book. She thinks it's brilliant. It's one of her favorite horrors. She loves the psychological. Like she's one of those that believes that the book is significantly better than this film.
Yeah.
And she gave me her interpretation from the book side, was that the pig is him accepting himself, taking himself to die. It's the reassurance of death, that it's sort of like the Grim Reaper. You go along, it comes along with you and takes you to your grave, and it's fine. And he welcomes it and is happy to go off, because he's no longer given up that internal fight between all of these voices, which is his mental health breaking down. It's the fact that his suicide is now his only contemplation, because there's no happiness left in his life. So he goes inside to experience what his life could have been, that pinnacle moment before he says, like, that's it. Because she's almost the voice of reason throughout, right? She's almost the voice which keeps him going and tries to keep him moving forward in a positive manner. But himself drags himself down constantly.
Yeah.
And it seems to build up to that point where he can no longer argue or envision himself in any way other than the one route out, which is, he's not the things he was promised in his childhood. He has no family left. He's
alone,
amused, alone, overweight from eating all of this ice cream that he was comforting on, which was a childhood memory again.
So you can argue that the pig was his first experience with death.
Yeah, I think so.
That's why it's his sort of shepherd to death, because his first experience was this horrible maggots that ate a pig.
Yeah.
How he sort of envisioned it.
And then that sort of also is the analogy for his own mental health, that these maggots have eaten away at the inside of him.
Yeah.
So eventually he can no longer take on his life, and that the voices have won, which was pretty interesting. I thought that's what I sort of gathered from it.
It's funny because that's such a great way of explaining it. But when you're sitting there watching an animated pig lead him through a school naked,
Yeah, it's
you can't put you can't sort of like go, oh yes, this is his perception of death leading him. It just doesn't have that sort of feel, does it? And then obviously the pig does lead him to, and this is where Beautiful Mind will come back in. So him receiving a Nobel Peace Prize on the stage set of Oklahoma, with everybody. I don't know if you know this. The entire audience are the children that were walking around the school throughout the entire film, but in old people makeup.
Yeah. And the three ice cream girls are there too.
Yeah, they're there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, everyone in the film is there. And he basically does a speech, which, Beautiful Mind, it's the exact same speech that John Nash makes, played by Russell Crowe in the film, about when he accepts his prize. And obviously, like you said, Alex, the Beautiful Mind video was in that shelf. And that's why I think that bedroom scene is so revealing, because it does have everything that he is subconscious. I just poked myself in the eye. Everything that he's like subconsciously.
How did you do that?
I just slipped on my finger and went further than I thought.
Yeah, that was class.
Everything that he's like subconsciously projecting is in that scene as a reference, and I think that's quite interesting. But I've lost it.
Elliot just projected that if you poke yourself in the eye, it hurts. He's crying from the Russell Crowe performance. It's the scene.
Petrified are you?
Yeah, no. So I think it's best to sort of go for the overall. How would you sum it up in one word? This film.
Shall I sum it up from the director's quote?
Oh yeah, go for it.
This is a quote from the director, and I actually think this is a really good way of explaining the film. Which is interesting because the director actually says he hates explaining his films. He says you need to work it out.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah. So this is Charlie Kaufman saying, the movie is dealing with somebody's experience of absorbing things that they see and how they become part of his psyche. He said, so this was in some ways how this person might have fantasized it out. So it's basically saying his whole life experiences have imprinted on him in some way, and they, as they would anybody, and he's basically projecting them in this in so many different scenarios and created all these things from deep within him. And this is his journey, all just before his thoughts before he takes his own life. And and I think that's a really good way of explaining it. I think that's really good. In terms of the one word, I would say intriguing.
Alex, what about you, mate?
What, in one word?
One word.
Lost.
That's a series, not a word.
Oh, sorry. But
I don't. I would say subconscious. I think the whole point is it's about the whole power of the subconscious and what it can do to you. But I
think overall, if you like good acting, very well shot, and you just like a little bit of a thinker, then I think it's definitely something to watch. There's so much more we could have talked about as well.
Honestly, so much. Jessie Buckley, I thought she was brilliant.
I think the performances from especially those four, the main four characters, the mum, dad, Jake, and Lucy. I think those performances were stunning. I think they were incredible. I just wish we had more time. I wish we could talk about it for longer because there's so much. But it's just one of those films, isn't it? It's a real thinker. And there's lots to talk about, and it'd be interesting to hear if anyone else has seen it, what they took from the film. If they disagree with us or agree with us, just let us know, because it's one of those ones we could keep talking about it for hours, couldn't we?
Literally, good. Literally good. Yeah, even if you don't like it, I think you have to appreciate it. That's the one that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think it can get pushed aside as something that could be potentially pretentious, but I think it's not. I think it's not pretentious when it's done with a certain intent and done in a certain way. And I think this film does it right. At the same
They
time,
say a good film always leaves you questioning, right? And it does leave a big question in your own head. I
This one
found
did a
myself today thinking about it after watching it last night. I did find myself thinking, it's really quite depressing and upsetting, and it is a big mental
quite
health
relatable.
Yeah, it really is, especially for anyone who's struggling with anything. It's really one which hits hard. So
Yeah.
I would
Do you
say,
find yourself? Have you ever thought of a moment where you think, I wonder if I'd done one different thing or said hello to somebody and how much it might have changed your life and all that? Have you ever? It's one of those sort of things where you're just about to fall asleep, you have that little thought in your head and it pops up and then you just end up like stewing over it. And I feel like this is a film that is basically that. It's a man stewing over what could have been. And I feel like that. Yeah, and I feel like that's quite a relatable thing for anyone. Like, whether you're happy in life or unhappy in life, we've all that what if, butterfly effect, sliding doors sort of thing.
And the topic of men's mental health and male suicide is huge right now. And this is a film which touches on that really quite well. And I think the one thing, if you take this and it hits you really in a horrible place, or it makes you feel really dark and horrible, that that's why we're lucky to have these things with good friends like these two, where you can just talk it out and just talk about stuff and elaborate on it. So yeah, it's really good in that regard too.
Yeah, I think so. So I think we'll end it there.
It's fun.
That was great. I really enjoyed that. Great chat. A very deep film, I believe. We'll have another one next week. I think we'll let Jack pick the next film. Maybe pick something a little bit lighter.
Pixar.
Yeah, maybe pick something.
Mulan. Hope you're ready.
Is that free yet?
The law.
Is it free yet, or do we have to pay for it? Is it?
Either way. I want to leave it on. What do you reckon? Stars, guys, out of this one, out of 5.
For me, it's a 4-star.
Al?
3.5, mate.
I agree with Alex. I'm going 3.5 too. Yeah.
I think I'm a bit biased in the sense that it's very much up my street, this sort of film.
It was an Elliot film.
Weird. What was your first note that you wrote down, Jack?
I wrote, Elliot's gonna love this. This is it within. I think as soon as they got to the house and the pig and the Silence of the Lambs little moment, I can imagine where the lambs are frozen, and I was like, Elliot's gonna love all these little moments in here, and the barn door swinging open and all that. And I was like, this is
the barn door freaked me out. When the barn door opened, I was like, oh, what's going on now? But to be honest, mate, I loved it about 40 seconds in. I was like, this is cool.
Yeah, I think you said that as well. You said 40 seconds in, like, hooked.
I was. I generally was. I think there was the opening shots of what moving around the house a little bit, aren't they? And then it sort of reveals the house. And I wrote down, revealing the house. I think it started with her, like, talking. I'm thinking of ending things. And I was just like, fucking like this. I like this film. Did you notice her coat change colour, by the way?
Elliot, we're at the end now, right? We could go right up here. Right, Alex,
the coat change colour? It was red at the beginning. It was red at the beginning, and it was blue at the end. Just saying. Weird shit.
I didn't notice that.
There's loads, okay? There's loads of stuff that she said. When he walked in the house, I just want to say this one because I forgot to say it. I love it. Yeah.
God, someone take the camera away from him.
Mate, when they walked in the house, he generally called upstairs and went, I'm here, we're here, like that. So, like, basically forgetting for a second that he had, that he was with her and had her in his subconscious.
Oh, yeah, and the picture where she went, that's me, whereas picture of him as a little boy.
But the picture actually changed. Did you see that? The picture did change.
It changed?
Oh, did
so
it?
The first time you look at the picture on the screen, it is him. And then it does change to her.
Oh, never noticed that.
Or other way round, it changes from her to him. When he says, no, that's me, he looks back at the picture. It's a different picture. Very similar.
See, at that point, I was thinking they could be like siblings or something, or brother and sister.
Yeah, I thought it could be.
Alex just wanted blood and gore and someone chopped up.
Because like after that point, she like, he doesn't even ask for it, but she raises up a bit of her cake and he just bites it off her spoon for no reason. And I just thought, they're related in some way, but they kind of are.
I'm going to quote Donkey from Shrek. It's layered, okay? That's what this is. It's a layered film. Very good. lot of subcontent.
Intelligent.
Let's move on. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Just About Movies podcast. If you've liked it, like, subscribe, share, all that sort of stuff. Ring the bell for notifications.
Ding ding.
Yeah, it's been a good one. I've enjoyed this. Thanks a lot, guys.
Nice one, Al.
Nice one, Al.
mate.
Nice one, Jack.
Bye.
Love you.